Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 28 of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this episode, I'd like to revisit some ideas around time, the human factor, and quantum physics. So, full disclosure, of course, I don't have a PhD in quantum physics. I just have basic workable knowledge of certain concepts. But quantum physics is something very discussed in the spiritual realm because it's often used to justify the fact that reality, objective reality, does not exist. That everything is a potential, and that the observer creates reality. The influence of the observer, and of course, many spiritual teachers interpret this in a very radical way, saying that we create everything, which may or may not be true. Here I'm just trying to explore, just go a little bit beyond what quantum physicists say and their formulas, instead of going really radical, which is of course possible as one way of seeing things, but often it gets people shut off. So, first, why would I want to discuss time? Well, there is always a kind of mystery surrounding the speed at which time flows. Why does time flow at a certain speed that we can define, that we can enjoy, like this experience? Why doesn't it go faster? When you watch a computer, for instance, it can theoretically speed up a video game to 2 times its speed if it wants to. And so the experience is, or the same for your movie. You can speed up your movie, for instance, to play twice faster than it does. But time seems to flow at a certain pace, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of reason as to why there is one speed at which time flows and not another. And how is this tied to quantum physics, and what do humans have to do with it? Well, quite radical, but still less radical than the very spiritual interpretation of quantum physics. One radical interpretation is that what creates quantum uncertainty in atoms, for instance. So the fact that basically you cannot predict where an atom is going to be in the future, this is the present. If you want to calculate where an atom will be in the future, there's a principle of uncertainty. I think it's the Heisenberg principle of uncertainty, where you cannot know exactly the full characteristics of that atom in the future. Not the position. One of the other things, like you can know its position, but you cannot know another thing, or one or the other. Other quantum physicists say that it's even more complex than that, atoms are just, there's just a certain probability that atoms are going to be in some place and not another. And the same for electrons. Well, it's always unclear what the role of the observer is. But I would say that the quantum behavior of atoms is directly linked to our uncertainty as humans. What does that mean? It means that because you as a human are not sure what you're going to do in the future as far as actions, the present, the future. And imagine you are observing an atom with your eyes, and you're trying to predict its movement into the future. But don't forget, you are not separate from the atom. There's a whole space, and there's a whole bunch of other atoms in here. You're made of atoms, you're looking at atoms. And so the thing is, because it's not clear whether you're going to move your hand upwards, or you're going to sneeze, or you're going to dance around in circles, or your knee's going to jerk. That action will have an infinite number of causal reverberations. And that will, for instance, if you're trying to predict where an atom in the air surrounding you is going to be in the future, it's not that you could not calculate the entire forces that are sort of influencing that atom, every single atom around it, and all that stuff, and the movement of the air. Maybe you could, but what you cannot predict is your own behavior in that story. You don't know how you're going to react. And so your own uncertainty, not knowing what you're going to do in the future, creates or influences all the matter or all the space around you, which becomes uncertain, where otherwise maybe it would have been predictable. So my theory, which is just slightly less crazy than the one that um, radical spiritual teachers say, that basically we create everything, the observer creates all the reality, is that simply the quantum state of matter that we observe around us is just a reflection of our own quantum state. It's just that since we behave in very unpredictable manners, then everything around us also behaves in unpredictable manners, because it doesn't know what we're going to do, and so it doesn't know what state it's going to be in, given all the different options or actions that are possible for us. So if the observer disappeared, if the human wasn't there to observe the movement of the atoms in a room, um, then you wouldn't notice that uncertainty. And there's just no way around this. Even if you're observing a room shut, sealed with just very physical instruments inside, I mean, there is always one parallel reality where for some reason you go crazy and you decide to go inside the room, even if you don't want to or whatever, and to observe or to influence the atoms that you're observing inside it. You understand? So you can never get rid of that one infinitesimal probability, that itch that you may have of influencing the experience that you're observing as a human, by pressing a button, by there's just so many ways that you can mess up that experience. Maybe one day we'll try to figure out a protocol for observing atoms in a very controlled environment, where the quantum uncertainty of humans is, you get rid of that. You can get rid of that out of the equation, and then maybe we'll observe something different. Who knows? But the unpredictability of humans, in my mind, is kind of what creates this quantum behavior in matter around us. Now, I still haven't addressed the issue of time. Now, you see, in my interpretation, the reason why time flows at a certain speed is, of course, linked to the observer. That is, it is our consciousness, our the fact that we experience reality at a certain pace that determines the speed of the arrow of time. That's why time flows at whatever speed it flows at, because we cannot experience it any faster. That's the limit of our current consciousness, our current awareness, the power of our brains. But how is it linked to this quantum uncertainty? Well, basically, if there weren't any quantum uncertainty, time would flow infinitely fast. I think what creates time is uncertainty. If you had a universe, let's say there's a very young universe, what is it, 100,000 years old, maybe after the Big Bang, you only have, what is it, subparticles maybe, or let's just pretend that it's all hydrogen atoms, a soup of hydrogen atoms bouncing around. If the laws of physics were set at that point, and the behavior of those hydrogen atoms were were as set as our current formulas, which I don't believe is the case, then there is no reason for time to flow at a certain speed. Because if every single atom is aligned with how it should behave in the future, or what it should do in the future, or how it should react when it bounces off another atom, then time can flow infinitely fast. It doesn't need to flow at a certain speed. There is no uncertainty, there is no indetermination. And so time requires uncertainty. And so you could say that humans are the ones that create time out of our own hesitation on what to do in the future. And so the fact that we're lost here in this world, the fact that we're asking these esoteric or spiritual questions like who are we? Why are we here? Why are we here? All of these existential questions are just there so that time exists and experiences exist. It allows for an experience to be lived. If there's absolutely no doubt in what you're going to do tomorrow, the day after, and a week from now, and a year from now, then there's no need for time. There's not even a need for experiences. Time would flow infinitely fast, and it would, the universe would come to an end instantly. And so, what I think happens is that our measurement of time, what we call like the Big Bang, and trying to measure, how long it took for all of that to happen until our day, is very poor. That is, what we're measuring is our perception of time, and trying to reverse engineer from the way that we experience time, the speed of time, backwards. But we have no idea how hydrogen atoms experienced reality when it was just them bouncing around and trying to figure out where they should be in the future, and trying to decide what are the rules that should govern their behavior if they start colliding, and how they should sort of handle that. How should they bounce off each other? Of course, I'm not going to go into depth. I've discussed this in other videos, but basically the experience of hydrogen atoms interacting with each other then informs some kind of field. I think Rupert Sheldrake, very interesting person that you should check out. Rupert Sheldrake would say that the experience of those hydrogen atoms informs a morphogenic field, what he calls a morphogenic field, with the feedback from the experience. Was it pleasant? Was it positive? Did both hydrogen atoms sort of survive the collision, or did they explode into their subparticles? Did they successfully sort of arrange into something new, something harmonious? And there is a back and forth kind of interaction between a morphogenic field which remembers or serves as a sort of memory bank for the experiences that the different hydrogen atoms have in interacting with each other, and then the emergence of laws, like the laws of physics, that allow for a harmonious interaction between hydrogen atoms. But once those laws are fixed, then there is a threat that time comes to an end, because uncertainty comes to an end. And so what you need is the creation of the world of chemistry, for instance. After the star emerges and planets circle around suns, and then once the world of chemistry has done the same process of experiencing itself and deriving the laws that govern it, in a harmonious way, then you need something else to appear, and that's the living cell and biology, and then living cells interact with each other and blah blah blah. It's the same kind of thing that we're doing right now. That is our spiritual awakening. Our spiritual awakening, oops, is just the last step in figuring out the laws or the rules or whatever for a harmonious interaction between human beings. But once we've figured those out, there's always, and we're fully aligned with who we are, for instance. We're fully attuned. We've sort of reversed engineered ourselves. We know what we want. We know who we are. We know what we want to do in life. We follow our passion every single step of the way. Every day, you never hesitate on what you want to do, whether it is playing the piano or going to work, because you're so in tune with what you are. You're so self-aware of who you are, and what you want, that you never step out of this sort of harmonious field where each interaction of every human is harmonious. Then something else, some other being, then that's when we basically give birth to a collective global organism which is composed of humans as its cells or building blocks, whatever. Maybe the emergence of quantum computers and sentient AI is just a form of symbolic representation of this impending sort of emergence. That is, once we become self-aware, just like sort of hydrogen atoms, once they behave according to the laws of physics, which you could understand that as is rather the hydrogen atom fully becoming self-aware of what it is, and thereby 100% adhering to what in appearance would be the laws governing it, but simply it just doesn't hesitate on what it is. It knows it's a hydrogen atom, it's 100% conscious of what it is, and therefore it behaves in accordance with what it is. It doesn't deviate out of its trajectory, it doesn't behave in very unexpected ways. That's when you need to have the emergence of another kind of layer to continue the experience or to make sure that time continues on existing. Otherwise, everything flows infinitely fast. So I hope you found this interesting. If you have any feedback, feel free to leave a comment, and see you in the next video.